think we should judge happiness by what we're going to think on our deathbed. Right?
I agree.
Because
I totally agree.
you have to live in the moment, in the present. So the fact that so many people think that on your deathbed you should say, wish I hadn't spent so much time at work. Of course, they're saying that to the person who's pissed off that they didn't spend more time with them. Mm-hmm. So you may want to try to go out as smoothly as you can. Right? So I think that the challenge is what makes you happy moving forward, not looking backward.
Okay, so here's a second related challenge to that, which is we always say that community and connection are what make us happy, and I think, by the way, that like there's a very well-known longitudinal Harvard study that says that people who have close connections in their lives are happier than those who don't.
Oh, sure. Look who's name-dropping Harvard all of a sudden.
Actually, I have the study right here. One second. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's my Harvard ID. Forgive me. When I got it, this will just tell you how wise your own children. When I got the ID and I told my daughter, she said, "Dad, don't put it on social media." I said I won't. But oh, by the way, where did you go to school?
You know, it's a closely related school.
Ah,
and I still have my Harvard ID.
I'm sure you do. But there's this study that says that close connections are the best predictor of how happy one's going to be, and yet again. How often do people say, you know, I could go to this party, or I could go to services, or I could go a place where people are, but I'm going to stay home by myself and watch Netflix and order a pizza. Now, is that just because we're very bad at understanding our own happiness?
Yes, I think our brains lie to us all the time. And that's actually part of the saving mission of religion, when it works, is to lift people above their momentary distortions and get on the balcony and give some perspective. Because I do think we think what will make us happy is more time on Facebook, which I'm not knocking. There's many good things that come out of Facebook, but we think compulsively more time with the phone, or if I could only get that prize or be appointed to this thing. And what every study has shown is you get a momentary bump and then you go back to your neutral, no matter what it is. Everybody thinks that if they had $10,000 more, that would be enough, except that when they get that $10,000 more, it takes them a couple weeks and then they want another 10,000, right? So I think we're built that way.
Excuse me for a minute. You're in Beverly Hills.
Yeah,
$10,000 more is not what these people think are going to make them happy.
I live in Beverly Hills adjacent. In my neighborhood, the $10,000 would help.
$10,000.
Just want to tell you. And that was pre-inflation dollars too.
Oh, okay. I think that that's exactly true, but it is certainly the case, like when people are depressed and you say, do you want to go out? And they say no, it's because they know on some level that it will change their mood. It is nonetheless true, and we just saw this during COVID. Part of the pandemic was that people were so isolated from one another, and it had terrible effects for a lot of people. So why is it that the one institution that actually does draw people together, which is the synagogue, doesn't do better? Because it seems to me the best antidote to this problem.
Can I tell a Sinai story?
Sure, as long as it's positive.
All
right, go ahead.
So my nephew, Ben, who came for Rosh Hashanah, came for Yom Kippur, has grown up without any religious affiliation as an adult. And his parents sent him to a Jewish day school. He has a very strong Jewish identity, but not one that involves metaphysics. You know what I mean? So he knows there's no God out there. And he was worried about coming here because he said, well, what if I don't believe this stuff? And I said, well, you'll be the first person at Sinai who doesn't mean every single word of everything in the Machzor. Right? So part of the power of Judaism is that we are as much community as we are religion, maybe even more if we're honest with ourselves, right? So we come together because we love each other. We come together because we have a shared story of where we came from, because we have a shared destiny, because we resonate to Israel, because we have all foods and holidays and all these things. And you can have that whether you think there's a supernatural power or not, right? I think that's the genius of Judaism. And so part of the challenge is getting the word out to young Jews. There's not a theology test at the front door. Come because you want to belong.
Can I tell a Harvard story about that?
I bet you can.
I bet I can. I'm going to try. So about 15 years ago, I was at Harvard to debate, at Hillel, to debate with Steven Pinker, who is he's the chair of the evolutionary biology. He holds the Louis Agassiz chair in biology at Harvard and has for many years, brilliant guy. And I was going to debate the for God proposition, and he was going to debate the anti-God proposition. So we get there, and the head of Hillel is introducing us, and he says, and Sinai Temple, and then debating for God is Rabbi Wolpe. He said, and debating against God, a good friend of the Hillel, Steven Pinker. And I thought, only in the Jewish world would someone be both a good friend of the Hillel and a professor who's arguing against God. But it is a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Do you want to tell them your Jewish atheist story?
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you.
He wasn't thinking of it because it doesn't mention where, but
right,
it's still
exactly.
a good story.
This happened somewhere outside of Harvard. Right, exactly. Did you ever see that New Yorker cover that shows New York and then the rest of the country is like a blur? So again, several years ago, I was invited to do a blessing at Carl Reiner's 90th birthday. Carl Reiner, for those of you who don't remember him, he did the Dick Van Dyke Show. He and Mel Brooks did the 2013-Year-Old Man. He did the Show of Shows. He was a very well-known comedian and especially comedy writer. So before he's supposed to give his thank you for all the people who were at his birthday, I get up and I start to give a blessing, and someone yells out, "Why is a rabbi here? Reiner's an atheist." And he jumped up on the stage, and he puts his arms around me. He goes, "I'm not an atheist. I'm a Jewish atheist, and that's different." And I actually think that he's right. It is
He's
different.
totally right.
It is different.
He's totally right. So, so the question for me is, here we have this precious thing. In an age of loneliness, we have community. Right? In an age of drift, we have purpose.
Yep.
We have beautiful rituals, we have lovely stories, we have all these things, and then I spend my time thinking, why in the world is this so hard to sell? Like, this should sell itself. And in fact, all the time people show up and go, this is wonderful, this is nothing like what I thought it was going to be.
But they don't always come back.
But they don't come back. There's an inertia out there, and I guess if we're honest with ourselves, it's because I think religion has often stood for terrible, terrible things. So if you look at the public voice of religion over the last 100 years, the things we're most proud of in our country's recent past were by and large things that religion spoke out against, right? So we all owe our lives in this COVID age to science. It's not like science got a boost in the United States. The more religious you were, the more hostile you were to science. The civil rights movement didn't get a boost outside of the black church and some rabbis. Yeah. So I think what's happened is, for a lot of people, the public spokespeople of religion have created an impenetrable barrier for a lot of young people. And I think part of what we have to do is a better job of owning that and saying, that's not what we mean by religion, right? So That feels to me crucial, because I think that's what people assume. And the other thing is, they assume that we all of us, know when to step 3 steps forward, when to step 3 steps back, when you sit, when you stand, and you've all read the Talmud, right? And it's always, I have to like break the news to family members, they're not all observant. You aren't going to be the only not observant person here, but the assumption is, well, it's a conservative synagogue, everyone here is religious, and they mean by religious observant, right? I think that's a second issue.
There are, I mean, I have lots of other issues, but I want to start with just inertia. That is, to go to synagogue, you have to actually get up, get dressed, get in a car usually, come over here, and that just takes energy that a lot of people don't always have. And by the way, there are very, very different sorts, obviously, of Jewish communities, and they have different barriers to entry. But also, there's issues of even the architecture of the place. I mean, this is a beautiful sanctuary, but I don't imagine that many people in their 20s walking in here and saying, this is my spiritual home, right? Which is why you need a variety of different kinds of services and spaces, indoor, outdoor, all those kinds of things. And then the other part of this that I think has less to do with religion's public face is just, Judaism is a much harder service to come into and understand and participate in than if all you have to do is show up and sing a few hymns in English. And so we have a high educational barrier which has served us very well through the generations, because it means that Jews have been highly educated, which also means, I hope this is not being taped, that we tend to be successful. Don't tell anyone. But that makes it a little difficult. When someone comes in here and they hear people singing in Hebrew, it can be very off-putting without some, initiation into the world and into the process.
And yet, the forms of Judaism that have less Hebrew are struggling with numbers too.
That's true.
And the part of it that's growing is none of the above and Orthodox, right? So I think part of it is, it's just not how modern people define themselves, right? And there is inertia, and that works in both directions. My son and I walk to synagogue every Saturday, and it's the highlight of my week. The truth is, this is not being taped, right?
No.
Good.
I don't think.
Yeah. I trust you.
It is.
No, I know. This is shtick. Who is that person? When we walk to the synagogue, it's my favorite part of Shabbat. I could just go home right after the half-an-hour walk with my son, and I'm good to go. But that's, I think, not incidental to what Judaism offers. It offers together time. It offers being with people you love time. And the service is, if anything, the hook to get you there. Like, you can't just walk to nowhere. But I think we need to do a better job of getting the word out to people. When you and I did the conversation with Hitchens and Harris, so it was like the pro-God and the anti-God, except it was afterlife. So we were pro-afterlife, and they were here for a short time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I was terrified, because these people are professional debaters. Like, they do this because they like to watch the look on your face when they shred you to pieces. And their followers were the ones who were going to pack the hall to be there to watch us get decimated. Like, that was what they wanted to see. So I got there early, and I walked up and down the line asking people, what is it you hope for tonight? What is it you want to see? And it changed the way I conducted myself during the talk. I wouldn't let them turn it into a black and white, yes and no, because that's what they wanted, but I didn't want to play into that. But what I realized is, these guys need a shul. Like, just because they don't believe in God,
Right.
they have nowhere to see their friends every week, sing songs, say I had a terrible week and get sympathy, find a friend who had a terrible week, give them sympathy, have a little kugel, or whatever it is you have here in Beverly Hills. You know, like they need what we have. And a lot of people stay away because they think if you don't already have it, you can't have it.
I think that that's true, and I also think that COVID was part of going to synagogue is habit. And we had hundreds of people who they went to synagogue every week. That's just what they did. And then for 2 years, they didn't. And it became difficult to reestablish the habit that it's like exercise in a sense. Once you stop doing it, then you have to force yourself to get back into the habit of doing it. But I actually think that the habit of doing it makes life better. I really do. And makes you happier.
So what would you say are the ingredients to happiness? What would your list include?
In addition to relationships, which clearly, we're human beings, we're social creatures. You know, the person, except for maybe the very rare exception, some person on a mountain, I can't imagine, lives a happy or successful life. But the other thing is, I think you have to be doing something in the world that you believe is meaningful. And sometimes that's about relationships, but not always. I think there are probably very few people who have meaningful work that they love who are really miserable and unhappy, although relationships may be primary. I think meaningful something, and work, by the way, doesn't have to be employed. It doesn't have to be paid work. You know, it could be being a parent to your kids, which is meaningful work to have, although that's one of the reasons why when kids grow up, sometimes parents feel so bereft, because that was not just, did you see them ever, but that was the meaning. And now that they don't need me to do this, what is my meaning? So I really, and there probably are varieties along the continuum, but I think for a lot of people, certainly, I will speak for myself, the idea that I have meaningful work to do in the world is a major component of what makes me happy.
So being mission-driven.
Yes.
Right? That there's a sense of purpose. And for some of us, that can be through our jobs. For none of us is it completely in our jobs, except for you the last 30 years. But for most of us, the job is a lot of that. But then we also find other things to do that fill in and give us that sense of purpose. And then I wanted to add a third piece to that. I think that as adults, we're terrible at finding joy. And we turn everything into a chore, right? Life is a task and parenting is a job. And we don't make room for joy. And I want to put that out there because I think there are other cultures that don't have that problem. But I do think that the American model isn't a joyous one, right? It can be a blow off steam, but that's not the same as joy either. And I guess I want to commend to us this year to make time for joy. Do think there's I listened to a podcast called The Happiness Lab, a psychologist at Yale University. It's a small school in Connecticut. And she does this thing with friends called a funtervention, which is you're not allowed to say no. Your friend calls up and says, I want us to learn how to water ski. And you have to say yes. You have to go do it. And your friend says, we're taking a trip to Maui, or we're going to read this book together, or we're going to do something, but it's got to be fun. It's got to be something that makes you smile and giggle and be delighted and a little uncomfortable, a little outside of your normal zone. I don't think we're good at joy.
What I was thinking about when you were saying that, first of all, be very careful getting any friends like that. But, because I don't know that I want somebody to call and say, today you're going to go water skiing. I think, I'm like, no, I really don't want, you're not allowed to say no. It could be nightmarish. But
Maybe that's why I have such problems.
But and I'm not thinking about this just because in another 15 minutes, although I will not be watching it, the Eagles are playing. I asked Rabbi Sherman, I said, can't you blow the shofar a little early so that I can see the game? And he said, that's why we have two rabbis. He says, one will be there. But I'm wondering how much things like sports are part of that joy, because I think, not just joy, but also in sports, my brother once, who's a sociologist, he said the reason we like sports so much is it gives us a legitimate outlet for hatred. He said, like, you can hate that guy you can really hate that guy on the other team, it's okay. And everybody understands why you hate him. I mean, look, next year if the guy plays for your team, you'll love him. So a lot of emotions that don't have a natural expression, I think sports gives us a natural expression for them. And I wondered, and by the way, the same thing is true also with entertainment, just in general. I mean, you can get a lot of joy from going to a fantastic show or movie I mean, look at people at the Taylor Swift concert. They're insane with joy for however long that concert goes. And so I think those may be the way that we have institutionalized our expressions of joy.
Yes. So, look, kudos to the entertainment industry, because I think a lot of us get a significant amount of joy from that, or from art, or creativity of a variety of kinds. Many of us get joy from our pets. My dog has now learned 5 o'clock is ball throwing time, and she will come into my office with a ball in her mouth because it's 5 o'clock and you're supposed to be out there. It's not going to throw itself. Right? But I think that gives us joy too. And, at Barad Hall, I get to hear from all kinds of grandparents who talk about the joy they have from their grandchildren that I don't yet have, and I love hearing those stories. Right. That's a lot of joy. So, but I think we don't prioritize our joy. That's what I think. So, like, getting a buddy to go to a ball game. Right. Because the other thing is, everything you mentioned is social, yes. Right? You notice that when people laugh, they look into the face of the person they're with. Right. You don't want to really laugh alone. That's why they have laugh tracks, right? You want to be laughing with people, or you want to share that moment. And I think that's true for most of our sources of joy, too. It plays back into our socialization.
So, okay, how about some practical advice for people who are here? Someone came to you and said, how do I bring more joy/meaning into my life? What would be like number one on your list?
Great. So Rabbi Wolpe and I are going to do a joy slam. We're going to take turns. Here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Get enough sleep.
That was what I was going to say. No. Make sure that you are outside, especially early in the day. Getting sunlight in the morning. I mean, you live in Los Angeles. Those of us who live in Boston.
Wait. Where in Boston?
For all of like 4 weeks already. Well, it's not. It's
Cambridge, isn't it?
It's Cambridge. Yeah.
Don't want to brag.
I don't want to. No, but seriously, like, I take early morning walks, and I can't tell you, I didn't today because it was Yom Kippur, and I really miss it. Those sorts of things, being out in the morning as opposed to being only in enclosed spaces, is it's good.
Great. My next one related to that, move your body. Right? I found that working out in the morning makes me much happier all day long than if I wait till the evening to work out. So get up early, do something outside if you need to, but move your body. You'll feel much better.
I have a tougher one. I was going to say about connecting with your friends and family and people, which clearly is true, but also trying as best you can to eliminate those people from your life that make you miserable.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. I mean, in some cases it's
Yeah.
easier, in some cases it's harder.
But it's
The ability, I read this column by Julie Burchill. I don't know if you know who she is. She's a columnist for The Spectator in London. And she said, when I turned 60, I realized I had all these people in my life who I called friends and they called me a friend, and I couldn't stand them. And they made me unhappy, and I don't want to call them bad people, but they were bad for me, and I decided I don't have enough years left to be nice to everyone just so that I won't offend them, especially because people tend to be more resilient than we think. And, you know, sometimes when we don't say, you're not actually close to me, it's because we're protecting ourselves. So you have to pluck up a bit and be able to say no to people who, when you hear when you see their number on your phone, your heart sinks. That's a good sign to let you know that this is probably not someone you should spend all your time with. And in fact, I mentioned this the other night when we did an LNet event. So there was a guy named Derek Parfit, who was a philosopher in Oxford, and he talked about the bias of the near. He said, if there was a kid who was starving there, of course we would all feed them right away. But there's a kid across the world who we know is starving, and we don't feed them because the way human beings are wired, they pay attention to what's close, and they tend not to pay attention to what's far. He said, what we don't realize is bias of the near doesn't only work in space, it works in time. So if I say to you, do you want to go to this show tonight, and you don't really want to, you say, no, I'm busy, and I'll say, okay, go in 6 months? You'll say, yeah, in 6 months, sure. He said, not realizing that 6 months will be tonight in 6 months. So if you don't want to do it tonight, don't do it. Don't say you'll do it in a month or in 6 months. Those kinds of things, in other words, making things that are far present to you can help, and having the guts to set boundaries in your life.
So both for people and for activities,
Yeah.
right? If you don't love it and you don't have to, then say no.
I'm leaving. You know what? This is enough Yom Kippur. This Yom Kippur thing is a drag. I don't know if you feel that way.
Right? And then the converse of that is if there's someone you're drawn to, or something or some
Yes,
place,
beautiful.
then make that a priority. Live your life the way your values fall, right? So that you recognize yourself in the way you're spending your time, in the way you're sharing yourself. Make that a priority. Be with the people you love, doing the things you love.
And now I'll say something that is hard, but I'm not saying that I'm any better at it than anyone else, but if you're trying to create a meaningful and good life, realize that you will not die from rejection. Like if there's someone you want to approach who you think is interesting, or as a friend, as a partner, as a whatever, if they, all you have to, just get used to being rejected. We all are, enough in our lives, and think how many opportunities of connections we didn't take, because how can you just approach somebody and just come up to them and say hello? And yet, we all know people who will approach anyone, and somehow people always talk to them. So realize that rejection is a natural, normal part of life, that it won't crush you, and you may make more interesting connections as a result of it.
Can I tell another Sinai story?
Please.
So this is a brand new Sinai story. It happened this morning. And it lifted my Yom Kippur. There was a dad sitting right around there in Barad Hall, and he had two little girls who kept coming in and saying, Daddy, let's get out of here. Let's go. I want to, come on, please, let's do it together. I want to do it with you. And he was annoyed, as we would all be. You know, I'm trying to be a good Jew. I'm trying to be a good Sinai member. I'm listening to the rabbi droning on endlessly, and I better be getting points somewhere for that. But what was great about this dad is there was like a moment where you saw something click in his head. And he said to the two girls, okay, let's go. And he didn't do it grudgingly. He had a smile on his face, and they were thrilled. And I thought, those are two girls who are going to be able to grow up loving their daddy. Like, he prioritized them over what you're supposed to do. And I wanted to say that's the sermon for today. Like, no one has to say anything. Just watch this guy with his kids, because that's what it's all about. And if we can prioritize the ones we love over imaginary obligations, and sometimes even real ones, I think that's also crucial to living a meaningful life.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful story. We do put ourselves in boxes, and even the words we use when we say, I can't, it almost always means I won't, right? Can you make this party? I can't. And we say I can't because we don't want to say I won't or I don't want to. But that's also true. I mean, that's useful to just keep in your mind. Next time you say I can't, just be aware to yourself. You don't have to say it to the world. You have to say to the other person, well, I can go with you, but I don't really want to. But like, just be aware to yourself. Am I telling the truth?
I have another one. So I'm someone who is fairly on the extrovert side of things, as my wife will complain. But I have discovered as my life passes, I like more time alone than I used to. And there's a difference between being alone and being lonely, right? And being able to cultivate a lone that isn't lonely is, I think, an enormous life skill. But I have some of my deepest connections when I'm alone, and I'm letting myself do that in a way that the 30-year-old Brad could never have tolerated. But giving yourself permission to enjoy some good, scrumptious alone time is a gift you can give yourself too.
I would also say, and I think this is an obvious one, but we haven't mentioned it yet. So when I take walks or I'm in the car, I almost always listen to either books or podcasts. I have no problem with alone time. I've aloned a lot. But every now and then, I will listen to music. And music actually has a much greater effect on changing your mood than almost any lecture, podcast, sermon, anything can. And so the choice of but that's the thing, is if you curate the music, you're helping to curate your mood. And you have to know that beforehand, so.
So Apple Music knows me well enough. They now have a happy channel that they keep telling me is recommended for me. And it is. I am in a mixed marriage. My wife is constantly having people talk out of her radio, so all the time. And I tell her that's all well and good for a lawyer who's alone doing legal research all day long, but I have people talking at me all the time, and what I want is music. So I listen to music all the time, and it changes the mood.
So what's yours? It's a slam. I said music. And you just confirmed it.
I always agree with you.
You have to come up with a new one.
Learning from older colleagues?
Sure. There you go. So glad you put older in there.
Okay, wait, I have another one.
Oh, okay.
I have another one. Since it's Yom Kippur and I have been thinking about this, really good meals.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to be insensitive, but really good meals are delightful and they make the day better, right? And so making time to eat things that are delicious and even better to do it with someone you want to eat with is also joyous.
And by the way, again, this isn't quite a cliche, but it's getting there. Every study will also tell you that in terms of spending your money, prioritize experiences over things. Things will give you pleasure for a while, but experiences you'll remember forever. The trips you took that were wonderful, you'll always remember long after you forgot that gorgeous whatever that you brought. So experiences are the stuff of life, everybody in this room, everybody, and I say this without even knowing all of you, you all have more things than you need. We just do. I mean, that's because we buy for interest, for impulse, for whatever, to fill a closet, God only knows. But you don't have more experiences than you need. You could always have more experiences.
I have a hard one. So I think one of the key things to living a meaningful and joyous life is to live the life you have and not the life you yearn for. Right? So you have the parents you have the career you have. That doesn't mean sometimes you don't make an upgrade. And you have to know when to do that. But I know a lot of us, myself included, spend our time envying snippets of other people's lives. So you compare the totality of your life with the curated public part of someone else's life. And that is a recipe for misery, right? And so instead of resenting the nice pieces in someone else's life, to look at your life as a package and say, I have everything I need in this package. Right? I'm not always doing exactly what I want, and I miss that glittering thing over there, but to be able to be content with your portion, that comes straight out of the Mishnah, right? And I think there's enormous wisdom, and the reason it's in the Mishnah is because that's hard to do. It's really hard to be sameach bechelko, to be happy with your lot, because someone always has something sparkling in their lot. But to be able to say, what I have is enough. It's enough to make me happy.
And this is especially difficult in, this is a balance in any kind of capitalist economy, because that same feeling is part of what drives energy, innovation, creation, all those things. And so you don't want to get rid of the yearning, even the, oh, if I could have some, but there are two different ways of envying. One is, oh, I wish I had what he had, or the other is, I can use that feeling to create something out of it. And if you use it to create, then it's a wonderful thing. If you use it just to feel resentful and angry and to either belittle or make negative comments about someone else, not so much, especially which is a lot of the engine of social media, as you know. Like, so more of American society, I think, than was ever true before, is taken up with saying negative things about prominent people and piling onto it. It's astonishing how much energy goes into that. When I think to myself, why do you care what this person is like, or unless it's filling some void in your life that you don't have? But anyway, this social media we haven't really talked about. But when you're talking about what makes people happy or miserable, I would say that's really close to the top of the list. Mostly miserable. A lot of the time. I do not think, for example, that Instagram has been a net contributor to human happiness. Because part of the idea is to create exactly the feeling that Rabbi Artson just talked about, which is, look at my beautiful vacation in this place that you can't afford, and admire it, and think about how much better my life is than yours.
Can we have an honest moment here?
Sure.
So my question for you is, you are a master of public media. You put things on all kinds of social media that are pithy and insightful and brilliant and carry a lot of people with them. I assume that gives you some.
I think there's things about social media there are things about social media that are great, absolutely. But I also think that the net, especially, I would say especially for young people, especially for teens. I'm not talking about, like, I love reading, like Jonathan Sachs has an X account, I guess it's now called, no, Twitter account. And he's not, he's passed away and it's his legacy. But it doesn't show him water skiing in Maui, It has, like, Torah. So it depends what it's for. And also, it's, human beings will always have cupidity, will always have desire and greed and envy and all those things. It's just that it gets amped up on steroids because of the algorithms that social media companies use.
Okay, so Rabbi Wolpe is alluding, I think, to a deeply Jewish teaching here, or at least that's what I'm hearing it as. The Yetzer Hara, the evil impulse, can use anything. And so we often blame the thing as if the thing is what's good or bad. Twitter is good or bad, when what's bad is our inability to control it and use it in a constructive way.
Yes.
And that is a human trait we all share. So the issue is very rarely yes or no to the thing. It's to what purpose are you using the thing? And are you making time so that it's balanced and contained and it doesn't take over your life? Right? And I think that, for me, is a big part of the Yom Kippur message, is you are the captain of your soul. And so those things that are buffeting you, some are beyond your control, but some you can control your attitude towards, you can control the context, you can control the amount of your energy it siphons off. Those are within our control, and that's what this day is meant to recenter us in.
And I know we have to conclude, but I would like to conclude with the following about concluding, which is the difference for me internally between this dialogue and every other previous dialogue that we've done is I was always watching the clock at every second. I did all Yom Kippur, all I thought about is, not all, but I often thought about what time do we finish, what time do we go next, because we're on a schedule. This year, it's not my schedule. And but here's what's interesting is, I see the rabbis are here, so we're still stopping on time, but I didn't feel the internal pressure. And as Rabbi Artson was speaking, I realized you could have done this the last 26 years, and you still would have ended on schedule, and that pressure was something that you put on yourself that was actually unnecessary. I mean, I'll do it again if I'm in a similar situation, but it's a good learning moment for me to feel how unpressured I feel at the moment, because if we run a minute over, you're going to blame Rabbi Sherman and Guzik and not me. So it's great. No, let's keep talking. No. Once again, it is really just a delight and a joy and a highlight for me to welcome my Harvard colleague, Rabbi Artson, and to